The story of Egypt begins with the Nile, flowing through endless deserts. This river was the lifeline of the land. Every year it flooded, covering the fields with dark soil that made farming possible in one of the driest places on earth. Without it, there would have been no Egypt at all. The Egyptians built their lives around the river's rhythm. Their year had 3 seasons: Akhet, the flood; Peret, the growing season; and Shimu, the harvest. Farmers planted wheat, barley, onions, and flax, while surpluses fed soldiers, artisans, and priests. Bread and beer became staples of daily life. The Nile was also Egypt's highway. Boats carried grain, stone, wood, gold, and people from the deep south to the Mediterranean. Villages grew into towns along its banks, and the river connected the whole land into a single system. For the Egyptians, the river was sacred. They worshipped Hapi, the god of the flood, and believed the field of reeds in the afterlife was a perfect version of the Nile Valley. At the same time, they feared its power. Too much flooding meant destruction. Too little meant famine. To survive, they mastered irrigation, dug canals, and invented tools like the shaduf to lift water into fields. Papyrus grew in the marshes, giving them material for baskets, ropes, mats, and the world's first paper. Fish, birds, and reeds added to their resources. The Nile provided food, transport, materials, and meaning. It was the center of existence. By 5000 BCE, farming villages lined its banks. People built mud brick houses, raised animals, and buried their dead with simple goods. Over time, these communities grew into larger territories. 2 regions emerged: Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. For centuries, they remained separate, with their own symbols and crowns. Around 3100 BCE, a king named Nama, sometimes called Menes, united them. He wore the double crown, red for Lower Egypt and white for Upper Egypt, showing the 2 lands had become one. With that, the civilization of the pharaohs began. The Nile was not just a river. It was Egypt's provider, protector, and symbol of eternity. Every pyramid, temple, and story of gods and kings traces back to its waters. Over time, this kingdom grew into what we now call the Old Kingdom, lasting from about 2686 to 2181 BCE. It is remembered as the Age of the Pyramids, because during this time Egyptians built the most iconic monuments in human history. The pharaohs of the Old Kingdom were not only rulers but gods on earth. Their power was absolute, and their duty was to maintain Ma'at, order, balance, and justice. To show their divine nature, they ordered tombs unlike anything the world had ever seen. These tombs were not just graves. They were eternal stairways to the afterlife. The first great step forward was the step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, built around 2650 BCE. Designed by his architect, Imhotep, it began as a simple mastaba, an ordinary flat tomb. But Imhotep stacked additional layers on top, creating the first pyramid. This was the dawn of monumental stone architecture in Egypt. Later pharaohs experimented with shapes and sizes. Snefru, a great builder, tried multiple designs. His bent pyramid changed angle halfway up, giving it its name. Then he built the Red Pyramid, Egypt's first true smooth-sided pyramid. With each attempt, Egyptian architects refined their skills, preparing for something even greater. That greatness came with Khufu, Sneferu's son. Around 2560 BCE, Khufu ordered the construction of the Great Pyramid at Giza, standing originally 146 meters tall, built from more than 2 million stone blocks. It was the tallest human-made structure on Earth for over 3,800 years. Its sides were aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal points of the compass. No wonder people still debate how it was built. Beside it rose the pyramids of Khafra and Menkaure, completing the famous Giza Plateau. Khafra also left behind the Great Sphinx, a colossal guardian with the body of a lion and the head of a pharaoh, carved from a single block of stone. Even today, it inspires awe and mystery. But the Old Kingdom was not only about pyramids. It was a time of prosperity and stability. Egypt's administration became more sophisticated, with scribes recording taxes, priests performing rituals, and officials managing provinces. Art and sculpture flourished. producing lifelike statues, delicate jewelry, and intricate reliefs showing daily life. Yet, this golden age did not last forever. Over time, the cost of building such enormous monuments strained the kingdom's resources. Local governors, called nomarchs, gained more power, while weak pharaohs struggled to control them. Droughts and poor harvests added to the crisis. By 2181 BCE, central authority collapsed, and Egypt entered what historians call the First Intermediate period, an age of division. Still, the legacy of the Old Kingdom endured. The pyramids remained standing as eternal symbols of Egypt's ambition, skill, and belief in life after death. They told the world that the pharaohs were not just men, but beings meant to live forever. After the glory of the new kingdom, Egypt began to weaken. By around 1070 BCE, the central authority of the pharaohs collapsed once again. Powerful priests of Amun in Thebes held great influence in the south, while other rulers controlled the north. Egypt was no longer united under a single strong leader. This began the Third Intermediate period, a time of division, decline, and foreign influence. Despite the troubles, Egypt remained rich in culture. Temples were still built, art continued, and ordinary life went on. But the nation was vulnerable. Invaders and neighbors saw opportunities. First came the Libyans, who settled in the delta and eventually established their own dynasties. Later, Egypt fell under the rule of the Kushites from Nubia. These kings admired Egyptian culture, adopted its gods, and even built their own pyramids in Nubia. For a time, they revived Egypt's traditions, but they, too, would face foreign threats. In the 7th century BCE, Egypt was invaded by the Assyrians, one of the most powerful empires of the time. Their armies stormed cities and placed Egypt under their control. Soon after, the Persians conquered Egypt, making it part of their vast empire. The pharaohs were no longer independent rulers but subjects of foreign kings. Still, Egyptians resisted and dreamed of freedom. At times, native dynasties rose again, but none could restore the greatness of earlier ages. The land of the Nile remained important, but it was now part of a much larger world of empires and conquests. Everything changed when Alexander the Great marched into Egypt in 332 BCE, seen as a liberator from Persian rule. He was welcomed as a pharaoh. He founded the city of Alexandria, which would become one of the greatest cultural centers of the ancient world. After Alexander's death, his general Ptolemy took control, founding the Ptolemaic dynasty. Under the Ptolemies, Egypt became a blend of Greek and Egyptian traditions. Greek language, art, and ideas spread, but ancient gods and temples remained. The most famous Ptolemaic ruler was Cleopatra VII, remembered for her intelligence, political skill, and her alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. She tried to preserve Egypt's independence, but in 30 BCE, after her defeat by Rome, Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. This marked the true end of pharaonic Egypt. The pyramids still stood, the temples still rose toward the sky, but the age of the great pharaohs was over. Egypt's spirit, however, lived on in its art, its writings, and its legacy, which continues to inspire the world thousands of years later. Though Egypt eventually fell under Roman rule in 30 BCE, its civilization did not disappear. Instead, it left behind a legacy so vast and enduring that it continues to shape the world today. The most visible reminders are the monuments, the pyramids of Giza, the temples of Karnak and Luxor, the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, all still stand as witnesses to Egypt's greatness. For centuries, travelers, scholars, and conquerors marveled at these wonders, unable to fully grasp how they had been built. Even today, they remain some of the most famous landmarks on Earth. But Egypt's influence goes beyond stone. The Egyptians developed one of the earliest systems of writing, hieroglyphs. For over 3,000 years, scribes recorded history, laws, prayers, and stories on temple walls and papyrus scrolls. When the Rosetta Stone was discovered in 1799, and later decoded by Jean-François Champollion, the lost voices of ancient Egypt were finally heard again. Egypt also made lasting advances in science and medicine. Their knowledge of astronomy helped create a 365-day calendar. Their engineers mastered irrigation, stone cutting, and architecture. Egyptian doctors treated wounds, set bones, and even performed surgeries, leaving behind medical texts that influenced later civilizations. Religion, too, left a deep mark. The Egyptian vision of the afterlife, with its judgment of the soul and eternal paradise, shaped ideas that spread into other cultures. Gods like Isis and Osiris were worshipped far beyond Egypt's borders, even in Greece and Rome. The blending of Egyptian and Greek traditions during the Ptolemaic era created new philosophies and spiritual practices. Culturally, Egypt inspired the world for millennia. Ancient Greek thinkers studied in Alexandria, whose great library sought to collect all knowledge. Roman emperors decorated their cities with obelisks taken from Egypt. In later centuries, European explorers, artists, and writers rediscovered Egypt, fueling the movement of Egyptomania in the 19th century. Even today, Egypt fascinates people everywhere. Movies, books, and games draw on its myths and symbols. Tourists travel from across the globe to see its monuments. Scholars continue to uncover secrets buried in the sands, finding new tombs and artifacts that tell us more about this remarkable civilization. The story of ancient Egypt is not just about kings and battles. It is about human creativity, resilience, and belief in eternity. For over 3,000 years, Egypt stood as one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. And even though its empire has long since vanished, its spirit lives on, in the stones, the writings, and the imagination of every generation that looks upon the Nile and wonders,